I want to walk through that by talking about this concept that I share with people often. It's called living in the parallel. I want to bring my friend here in, and I'm going to call him Joseph. Joseph is living in Genesis chapter 50 and verse number 20, and he lives acutely in the parallel. And what I mean by that is that Joseph has a life of suffering. God intentionally, purposely brought suffering into Joseph's life for a purpose, for a reason. And so there is no question that Joseph is a suffering individual as he's living down in Egypt. But Joseph was not suffering-centered. And when you talk to people and when you listen to people, you want to hear how they talk about their problems. Some people are suffering-centered. Joseph was not. It didn't mean that his suffering wasn't real. It didn't mean that he wasn't going through a difficult time, but the way that he talked was different. He came from a God-centered perspective when he talked about his suffering. So when you listen to people, you want to try to discern, are they problem-centered, suffering-centered, always talking about what is going wrong in their lives? If they are not living effectively in the parallel. Again, there's no question it was meant for evil. So you don't trivialize, don't marginalize, you don't make fun of. It is very real, but you need to move them to a new way of thinking about the problems that are in their lives. And this is what I mean by living in the parallel, is that we want to be sovereignty-centered. We're either sovereignty-centered about the suffering in our life, or we are suffering-centered. Joseph was sovereignty-centered. It's about where you put the accent mark. He knew that what his brothers and other people were doing to him, it was very evil, but he also had enough awareness about God that he knew that God meant it for good. And so as you talk to people about their problems, you want to slide the accent mark from what you meant for was evil to God meant it for good. Now, once they are able to do that, they are effectively positioned to be able to deal rightly in their own hearts about what is going on in their lives, and then they are positioned to respond to God correctly, which ultimately enables them to be effective disciple makers in God's world. Unfortunately, too many people cannot get to this place because they don't know how to live in the parallel. And they end up being more suffering-centered than sovereignty-centered, and until they can flip the narrative. Now, it takes a while for people to do this. It takes a lot of work. I have been there. You have been there. And you will interact with people who are going through this process. So you want to teach them how to live in the parallel. And part of the implication here is it doesn't mean suffering is going to go away. Both of these things are true. God is sovereign and he is in control, and suffering is ever present. We have to learn to put the accent mark on God's sovereignty. I do want to take a brief coffee break and to thank many of you who support this ministry. You're the ones that make these webinars free. You're the ones that cause our resources to go around the world every day and reach hundreds of thousands of lives. And I want to thank you for supporting our ministry, $5 a month, $50 a year. Many of you support more than that, but you can do that. And if you are able, I would appeal to you, if you happen not to be supporting our ministry and you benefit from it and you believe in what we are doing, may I appeal to you, if you can, if you're able, to support us. It would allow us to do much more. I always have more ideas. There are always more needs than we are able to fulfill, and we only fulfill them when we have the ability to do it. And so if you're able to help us, I would encourage you to pray about that. And if you believe that's God's will, would you support us? Thank you so much for listening to my coffee break.